The application is therefore declined. I call on Government Orders of the Day numbers 1 and 2.
Telecommunications, Property Access and Other Matters Amendment Bill, Committee Stage. Resource Legislation Amendment Bill, Committee Stage.
I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Telecommunications, Property Access and Other Matters Amendment Bill and the Resource Legislation Amendment Bill. Mr. Chairman.
Members, the House in committee on the Telecommunications, Property Access and Other Matters Amendment Bill and the Resource Legislation Amendment Bill. We turn first to the Telecommunications, Property Access and Other Matters Bill, and the question is that a point of order, Tim Macindoe.
Mr. Chair, with the agreement of the whips across the House, I seek leave for the separate debatable questions of the Telecommunications, Property Access and Other Matters Amendment Bill to be considered in one debate, with the voting on those questions to be taken separately at its conclusion.
Leave is put for that purpose. Is there any objection? There appears to be none. The question is that parts 1 and 2, schedules 1 and 2 and clauses 1 to 3 stand part. I call Clare Curran.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Can I begin my contribution on the committee stage of the Telecommunications, Property Access and Other Matters Amendment Bill with reference to subpart 3, part 4 and subpart 4 in part 1 of the bill. I'd like to start really by going to the heart of the two major issues that this bill addresses and deals with. A couple of weeks ago, I was contacted by the chairman of the management committee of a heritage-listed block of flats in Mount Victoria in Wellington. This is 25 flats with 6 other properties, which are variously homes and flats. It's privately owned between all owners. The person that contacted me had been leading the charge on behalf of all owners to get fibre, broadband fibre installed for more than a year. The issue was that one of the owners in one of those 25 flats and 6 other properties was unwilling to consider having fibre installed, and as a result the whole thing had ground to a complete halt, and there appears to have been an impasse on how the rest of those people could get access to ultra-fast broadband. This bill addresses that particular issue. Can I also refer to a submission that was received by the Select Committee considering this bill by Ernie Newman, who is a very well-known character in New Zealand, formerly the Chief Executive of the Telecommunications Users Association and a long-time, I guess you could say, an activist in terms of better connectivity for New Zealanders. He asked the committee in August last year, in our first round of submissions on this bill, to consider adding a section to the bill that was before the Select Committee to provide deemed access for fibre optic cable within overhead electricity lines, as had been floated in an MB discussion paper, and cited that this would be an historic step change, enabling large tracts of rural and provincial New Zealand to enjoy not just the rural broadband that they've been conditioned to expect, but fully fledged city-style ultra-fast broadband. Now, Mr. Chair, this bill solves both of those really quite fundamental issues, and if the members on this House during the course of this debate this afternoon sound quite effusive about a government piece of legislation, that's because they actually are. And we heartily support this legislation. And we're so effusive about it because it was our 2014 policy. And not only that, but half of it, the latter part, which deals with the electricity, with fibre being strung out on electricity lines, half of it was actually crafted in the Select Committee and is not actually government policy. In fact, it goes way beyond government policy in terms of helping to provide an opportunity for a true economic step change in rural New Zealand, for rural New Zealand to get actual fibre, not the half-baked rural broadband measures that have been provided so far by the government, but real fibre strung out across properties throughout and providing a network across rural New Zealand should the electricity companies choose to take up that opportunity. So, Mr Speaker, those are my opening remarks on this because it's it is actually in subpart 3, which deals with the access issues and the access to shared driveways and multi-unit dwellings, which take up an enormous number of connections, Mr Chair.
Clare Curran.
Which have been described by one provider as 60% of their work. So dealing with the roadblocks that exist for people to get connected if they live down shared driveways or if they live or work in apartment buildings or multi-unit dwellings. The access provisions in subpart 3, part 4, on page 8 of the bill, which start on page 8, which says the purpose of this subpart is to enable more people and businesses to obtain the benefits of fibre to the premises and other technology within a shorter time frame by recognising that when more than one person's consent is required for a fibre to the premise service provider or a network operator to access the property, there are difficulties in obtaining those consents. The process of installing infrastructure is delayed and opportunities to realise the benefits of that technology are missed. And what this bill does, it provides for a tiered system of statutory rights of access. So that's dealing with one of the issues. And then in subpart 4 on page 32 of the bill deals with the substantial part, which is the new part of the bill, which provides the right of access to use existing electricity works for telecommunications and deploying fibre optic cable into rural New Zealand. Can I acknowledge the work of officials and PCO on this bill? Enormous amount of work and attention to detail has gone into this bill, and truly do acknowledge the effort and the attention and the commitment that they made in order to get this bill before the House. Can I acknowledge the work of the Select Committee that really truly did work hard on this. We went through 2 rounds of submissions because once we had actually taken on board the fact that we needed to consider the new part of the bill, we went through another round of submissions to ensure that we were doing it right and that we were dealing with any fish hooks and unintended consequences. And the committee acknowledged the Chair, Melissa Lee, for being very open to this process going forward. It was truly a Select Committee doing the job that it should be doing in Parliament, which is to get the best piece of legislation before the House. And so very keen to get this passed and into law. And I note that, and in further comments that I'll be making in this discussion this afternoon, I note that the Minister has tabled a quite considerable supplementary order paper, which ultimately does deal with technical changes, with making the bill even better than it was when it came back from the Select Committee, ensuring that we have got it right, and there will be more comments to be made on that. But ultimately, this is necessary. It should have been done ages ago. The government trumpets its ultra-fast broadband agenda. Well, it's an important piece of infrastructure, but there's been too many roadblocks. At least 17% of the applications for ultra-fast broadband have been held up for months, and in some cases years, because of the difficulties in getting consents. If you live down, there's a lot of people in New Zealand who live down shared driveways. There's a lot of people that live in apartment buildings. Sometimes they just simply give up trying to get UFB because it's just too hard. This legislation should have been before the House 3 years ago, actually, and why it's been held up, well, I think it got held up because the previous minister was all caught up in property rights debate. And, well, let's have that discussion, because why has it been held up? There's been reports by MB on it. The industry's been begging for it, asking for it to be sorted. And finally it is. And we've also got that incredibly useful, important economic opportunity for rural New Zealand that this includes. That was not, let's just remember, it's not government policy. It goes way beyond government policy. It's a really useful piece of legislation that comes out of a select committee. It shows that Parliament is actually working really well when opposition members are motivated and the industry just keeps on pushing.
Mr. Chair.
The Honourable Simon.
Mr. Chair, it's really good to